here talking to you right now. I'm so very excited about this topic because although what I will be teaching at the symposium is not really new, because electronic voice phenomenon has been around since the 1920s, but it's very new for us lay people to be getting our hands on this kind of technology. And so I'm very, very excited to tell you about it and about what we will do with the workshop. Now, as some of you may know, and some of you may have already joined up for the Arizona conference, the conference in September is being held in Scottsdale, Arizona on the 15th through the 17th of September. And the Afterlife Research and Education Symposium is going to bring together all kinds of interesting people. We have people working in all forms of communication with spirit, from mediums to what we call digital mediums, which is what I've gotten into, to people who work with transitioning into the next stage of life. And it's going to be fascinating. So if you're one of those people who loves the afterlife and is desiring to learn more about communicating with the afterlife, join us. We're going to have a great time. If you want more information, you can go to afterlifestudies.org, and there you will find all the information about the conference. I will tell you that their early bird registration will end on the 15th of July. So my understanding is if you're planning to come and you want to get the better price, register now. You have until July 15th. Now, I am so excited about this because I have lost my son, Danny. Many of you know that my son, Danny, passed in 2008 of an overdose, and that he's been communicating in so many ways since he passed. But the latest adventure in my life has been to explore electronic voice phenomenon. And I cannot even begin to tell you the joy it has given me. It gives me all the time to be able to connect with my son in this way. And this is why I'm so hell-bent on helping others find their way to this as well, because I think it's for all of us, and I think it's phenomenal. Now, I was supposed to talk a little bit about me. Those of you who know me probably have heard my story a million times. But those of you who know me know that I was the biggest non-believer in this subject as a young child and growing up in the 50s. As a matter of fact, I thought that people, who's ever sending all these lovely signs of kisses and love, thank you guys, you're going to tear me up here, and this is not what I want. So anyway, I grew up in a time when the ideas we talk about now were not commonplace. I am 66, and in the 1950s, we really did not talk about the things we talk about now as if it's very normal. And I totally believed that people who believe in what I now teach were either deluded or probably unintelligent people. And I was pretty judgmental. I thought I knew everything at 17, didn't you? But at 16, I came down with a very, very serious case of Crohn's disease. And I had been told about a healer in Britain by the name of Harry Edwards. But at the time, I was absolutely convinced that things like that were not real. So I would not pursue what I had heard. And my family also was very much aligned with me in believing that all things you couldn't see were not real. And so we pursued nothing except traditional medical science. And after a number of years of doing only that, the Crohn's disease had progressed terribly, and I began to hemorrhage. By my senior year of high school, I could not continue to stay in school. I had to stay home and be tutored. And the hemorrhaging got so bad that they gave me blood transfusions and infected me with the hepatitis C virus. So by the time I was 19, I had no colon left and a very, very serious liver disease. And this was after being sick for 4 years, when I finally, just out of desperation, decided that I had nothing to lose, that I didn't believe in this hokum pokum stuff that some man in England was going to tweak his nose like in Bewitched, and I was going to get well in New Jersey. But I had been through so much that I knew I had absolutely nothing to lose. And so a letter was delivered to this man in England by my dad, who to the day he died teased me about all of this. But they told me just to explain what had been going on, and I wrote my letter, and it was hand-delivered on a Thursday. And the next night, Friday night, I had not been given any books to read. It wasn't a faith healing because I didn't believe anything. I just didn't want to die. And I got well so quickly, my head spun around, and within 48 hours, I had so much energy, I was flying. And 2 weeks later, when I had my regular set of blood tests, it had jumped a third of the way towards normal, which is the first significant change we'd seen in 6 months. And that was the beginning of the turnaround in my health and in the turnaround in my thinking. After I was finally well in the blood area, and it looked like my liver disease had been overcome, I began to realize that I didn't understand, how this man could do this when he was in England and I was in the United States. So I started reading his books, and Harry Edwards wrote that he did not work alone, but that he worked with spirit doctors who had been beings who had been doctors in their last lives, and now that they were in spirit, were still working to heal the sick. And I mean, at the time, I did not believe in spirits. I just couldn't believe it. But on the other hand, I knew what I felt. And I had never experienced energy like this in my entire life. And the blood tests started to improve. And I just knew that something I couldn't see or feel or touch was lifting me. And this was the start of my realization that there is an invisible world. Not only that it existed, and I'm getting emotional, but that it cared about us, that it would interact with us. And so that got me completely hooked at 20 years old. And here we are 46 years later. I'm still completely hooked, folks. But I never realized in all the years of studying, I was a student of Jane Roberts, and in the Sept class is where I met my husband. But I never realized what this would mean, that one day I would lose a child, and that then these ideas and the knowledge, what this knowledge would mean to me, I just didn't get it. I studied these things because they fascinated me, but I never knew that one day they would save me. And so, of course, no matter what you know about life after death, if you find your child dead in his bed, you're pretty devastated. But 1 week later, I realized I knew how to find him. I knew I had to find him. And so 1 week to the day after he passed, I sat in Glenn Dove's office on Long Island. And Danny came through, and we continued our conversation as if, well, what have you done in the last week since I've seen you? And that was the start of my book, Lost and Found. I spent the first couple of years after Danny passed going on many ghost hunts, as I called them. And my older son, Aaron, went with me, and we went to mediums all over. And I wanted to see that if the medium was true, if Danny would always be Danny. And, of course, he was. And my son had the mediums in stitches. That's how I knew it was D. And then he started giving me signs beyond anything I'd ever expected. If you read my book, Lost and Found, some of those stories are in there. And I was just amazed at the ability of spirit to get us to look at the sign just at the right moment, a sign that will have ultimate meaning to us. Or pull up behind a car that has a license plate with their name on it, or their special date numbers. So they worked in a lot of ways, and I was always happy to know Danny was with me. Went to lots of mediums, still hosted a lot of mediums. And interestingly, I had heard about electronic voice phenomenon in 2006 at a conference in Canada. Mark Macy was there talking about ITC, and I was intrigued back then because I've always been interested in spirit. But I was a little scared of it back then, I will admit. And I didn't have a son in spirit, so I didn't have that same need or longing to do this. Somehow, though, down the line, I got to watch that wonderful documentary by Dan Drazen entitled Calling Earth. And I was very, very intrigued with the big circle. So at that time, I got some email addresses, I guess, from the documentary, and I wrote a few people. But whoever got back to me said they were not really recording then at that time, and they couldn't really help me. So I dropped it. And then one day I was doing an interview on Roberta Grimes' radio show, and the lovely Vicki Talbot, who is also a bereaved mom and fellow researcher in EVP, was listening to the interview. And she contacted me after the interview to register her son Braden for prayer. And we just got to communicating, as us bereaved moms are known to do. And Vicki began to tell me about how she was communicating with Braden through EVP, and that she was part of the big circle and very, very involved. And so Vicki made me realize that this was going on and I could do it. And then I learned there were directions at the AREI website, and I went to them. But I'm not the most computer savvy, but what I did have was my little friend Joshua Freed, who is an extraordinary computer guy who does this for a living. So I invited Josh to come over, and I asked him to please go through those directions with me and set me up to do this. And he knew exactly how to configure everything so that the recordings I made would become MP3s and different things I wouldn't have known how to do myself. And by the time he left, I was able to start this process. And the first time I played back a recording and heard an actual EVP, I nearly jumped out of my pants. I was just, oh my God, because it's so wonderful. And so I started doing this with a fever. Danny started coming through. I started to be able to hear better what was coming through. And that was the start of my work in this field. Another point, Craig Hogan said to me, well, would you like to try to do readings for other parents? You could bring in a parent via the cell phone, such as Sonia Rinaldi does in Brazil. So I started looking into what Sonia had been doing, and she's a remarkable woman who will be at the AREI Symposium, who I am so looking forward to meeting because she's truly a pioneer in this work, and without her work, there would have been no ground laid for my work. So I said, yes, I would like to try that. And I started doing what I had been told Sonia did by putting the cell phone on speaker and lining it up to the recording and inviting a parent to join me and speak to their child. And lo and behold, we are getting full-blown communications. I am so happy about it. I can't even begin to tell you. I will say that initially I was terrified that I'd get a mom on the phone and we'd flatline. Nothing would come through, or we wouldn't get the right kid. And then my son Danny said, I can bring whoever you want. And I remember thinking, okay, let's see. But he's obviously so good to his word because I've done well over 125 readings now. And I think that we've always had the child come forward. It's just the most phenomenal thing. We're talking to heaven. And we all can do this. I truly believe this. Now, maybe some of us will have more time to put in. Maybe some of us will have a stronger belief in the presence of spirit. Maybe there are things we need to work out, such as when we take medium classes, we don't all become mediums instantly. But we start opening doors and opening pathways, and before we know it, we are able to connect with our children on our own. And I firmly believe that what you lose in the flesh, you can find in the spirit. And that the only way to really live with loss is to connect up in spirit. And so I have decided that this is something that we all who want to have in our hands should have in our hands. So when Craig Hogan asked would I want to teach this at the symposium, I said, oh yes, I'd love to. And I sat down trying to figure out what I did, and then I realized I had no idea what I was doing, and that it was Joshua Freed who had made this work so smoothly for me. And so I again hired Josh, and he and I have been working for months now, and we're finishing our step-by-step program that will allow the class participants to know each step needed to configure their computer to record EVPs. We are encouraging those who take my workshop to bring their laptops with them. And by the time you go back home, you should be all set up to start recording. We are using only free software. So if you have your laptop, you should not have to spend more money for any of the things that we are going to do. And I think that in time, we will have a whole bunch of us who will be able to go on and converse with our loved ones. And oh my God, I mean, what could be more wonderful? We live in a day and age where the digital process has made things possible that have never been possible before. I can't even believe that I'm talking to people and I'm seeing that people are joining and signing up, and they're all over the globe, and who would have ever thought? But now we're taking it to the spirit realm. We're communicating with our loved ones on another vibrational plane. How cool is that? And when you think about it, and I think about the pioneer women and those who lost children before us, who loved ones, husbands, best friends, and never had anyone to talk to. We not only have such a tremendous amount of support, but now we can talk to our loved ones in spirit. So I kind of look at it this way. Danny's in a foreign country. I do have a visa to go there. I just don't know when it will come due. But I do know I am going where he is. But what's the next best thing, you know? Well, I say that's being in touch. If my son lived in Europe or in a foreign country to me, I'd put in the time and I'd put in whatever I had to make a call to him, to connect with him. And that's what I'm proposing, that we all learn how to use the components at our fingertips now to make this connection. Could it be clearer? Will there be better devices in the future? I hope so. But I can only say that this does work. We are getting through. The EVP line is working. And I'm here to try to help others set up an EVP line in their own home so that they might have the joy of communicating with their loved ones in spirit. I don't know what else to tell you really, except I'll be there and we'll be working on it. Eventually I will put the program online, and it will be online for anyone to use as the years go on. And hopefully in time we'll think of talking to our loved ones in spirit just like we think of talking to each other, just a click away, and we're going to make it so if we can. Now, if there's any questions, I'm told that people can write something like in the chat and I can answer, but I don't see any questions, so I'm just going to tell you how much I appreciate that you're here. Well, let me see. There are some things. Let me. Well. This is just too much. So I'm just going to say, I really appreciate that you're here with me today. If you can share the video, great, because we'd like a really big turnout to the conference. And my door is always open. If I can help anybody, you all know how to reach me, and those who don't, SheriPerl.com. You're very welcome. Someone just said thanks for doing, and I say thank you, all of you, for sharing and for being part of my life, because you've given me such a sense of purpose, and I can't thank you enough. So see you in September, and if not, just stay in touch through the internet. Okay, friends, I think I'm supposed to sign off now. I'm going to hit the finish button. Love to everybody. Be well.